Lentimas Town by Pebble Dwebble. I was always jealous of the new kids who grew up in towns with Pokemon labs. All those professors who would just hand out new Pokemon, practically gift-wrapped. Then there was me, Hazel, 12 years old and stranded in Lentimas Town, friendless and homeschooled. I really wanted a Pokemon. We had plenty of local ones, Nummels, Scorpies, Trapinches, and stuff, but I never really wanted one of those. It wasn't that I hated those Pokemon, but the small group of town bullies all had them. They'd battle and battle until they had all fainted, then they would swagger off to the Pokemon Center and then battle again. I know it sounds stupid, but I don't want to be like those kids, even just Pokemon type. Again, it might have been jealousy, but I hated them. They didn't really care about their Pokemon, they just wanted the strongest one, and made them work far too hard. Not to mention they'd attack me too. When I got too near their hangout space, I'd get a bite or a poison sting in my direction, and if I told my mother, they would just pass it off as an accident and explain that I really shouldn't be getting close to a Pokemon battle anyway. One October afternoon, I was sitting outside my house just watching the clouds when the gang came around the corner. They were on their way to the Pokemon Center. They had almost fully passed me when one of them stopped. It was one of the older boys, Scott. He was looking at me, smirking. I got nervous. They didn't normally talk to me, unless they were calling me names or attacking me. I got ignored. "Hey kid," he said, leaning over my wall, still smirking. Hi," I stammered back. I tried to work out what they wanted. Surely they wouldn't do anything in front of my house, would they? I thought to myself. The rest of the group walked over, still standing a little behind Scott. They were whispering and smiling, a slight ripple of laughter passing through them. "You want to hang out with us?" Scott asked. Me? Why? They'd never shown the slightest interest in being nice to me before. I was the youngest kid in town, the loser whom it was fun to exclude. "We think you're pretty cool," he said. The giggles of the others picked up a little. "Yeah?" I said. I didn't really believe him, but I still wanted to sound cool. "Yeah, but if you want to hang out with us, you gotta prove you're tough." "How?" I asked. Something began to churn inside of me. A little light of hope flickered. Despite my distaste for these people, I really did want some friends. "You gotta spend 1 hour in the strange house," he grinned. I gulped. The strange house was just a short walk outside of town. I could never go there because of all the tall grass and wild Pokemon, besides it was definitely haunted. I'd never seen a ghost-type Pokemon before, but my imagination had always made them terrifying. "No way, Scott. She won't do it. Was too scared," a girl named Cindy called. "Scared little Pidove," another voice from the group mocked, and they all laughed. "Pidove, Pidove, Pidove," they chanted in a sing-song voice. Tears were stinging my eyes. I felt like an idiot for getting so upset, but I couldn't stop it. I wiped my hand over my eyes quickly, hoping they wouldn't see the tears. "I am not a Pidove," I blurted out. "I'll go." As soon as I said it, I regretted it. I didn't even expect to say it, and from the looks that the others had on their faces, they didn't either. I clasped my hand over my mouth, far too late to do me any good. Their smirks didn't take long to come back. "Fine," Scott said calmly. "We'll come get you tonight at 10 p.m. I gulped. Of course they were going to make me do it at night, but there's no way I was backing out now. Time has never passed so quickly as it did that night. At about 9, I told my mom I was feeling sick and going to bed. Then I went upstairs. It was only a half lie. I really did feel sick. I wasn't good with nerves. I picked up my torch. I really wanted to take it, but there was no way they were going to let me have it if they knew about it. I needed to hide it from them. I found a small bag and shoved it in, but it looked weird with just the torch, so I shoved in a few random items. Extra batteries, a jumper, a couple of Pokeballs, bulking up my bag enough to look normal. Finally, 10 o'clock came around and it was time. I crept out my window and along the garden wall without my parents seeing. I hopped the fence and I was alone. No signs of any of them. Relief fluttered in my heart for a second. Maybe the whole thing was some dumb joke? They'd be laughing at me. Dumb little kid who thought she could hang out with the cooler kids. Bullying would hurt, but right now, I was just happy I wouldn't have to do it. I tried to climb back into my house when I heard them. The laughter, my heart sank. They showed up. "Hey, she's here," Cindy yelled. "I can't believe she showed," another laughed. A large, thick-necked boy called Robbie. The group strode up to me. "Time to go, kid," said Scott, who looked a little impressed despite his cool attitude. They were all really nice to me on the way over there. I was surprised. Maybe I'd been wrong about them. As we walked up to the old house, they were telling me about how they'd just been on the other side of the door. They talked me through it, and it was just 1 hour after all. I'd be fine. I believed them. Robbie yanked open the heavy door to the house. It looked really dark inside. I gulped. I felt a hand on my back pushing me towards the dark entrance room. As I crossed the threshold, I felt 2 more hands on my bag pulling it away from me. "No!" I yelled as I turned and grabbed at it, but it was no use. They were stronger than me. I felt the material rip beneath my fingers and heard some clattering on the floor as I went flying backward into the darkness and the door slammed shut in front of me. "See you tomorrow," one of them called as I heard their voices fade. "Yeah, sweet dreams," they laughed as they walked away. I could hear them brag about how clever they all thought they were. I was left alone in the darkness. The tears came quickly, first stunned and silent, then giving away to heavy, ugly sound sobbing as I gasped for air. I didn't know how much time had passed, but it felt like forever when I finally cried myself out, had the courage to move. I scooted to where the wall was. I pressed my back against it and blinked, trying to get my eyes used to the darkness. It was no good. There was literally no light source. The combination of no street light and a cloudy night meant the windows didn't even let a tiny amount of light. I eventually remembered that I had heard something land on the floor as I scrambled around hoping it had been my flashlight. "Oh please, oh please, oh please," I begged as my hands searched the ground for the object. My left hand brushed something and I picked it up. I despaired as my hands felt the smooth rounded shape, the stupid Pokeball. Why'd I even taken this? It was pointless. I curled up in a ball, trying. A slight noise came from somewhere on the other side of the large room, and my head snapped up. It must be a ghost Pokemon. My heart began to race. My back pressed hard against the wall behind me. That's when I saw it. A faint purple glow in one corner of the room. It floated a few feet into the air, then suddenly swooped down, and in until it was about 6 feet away from me. I was terrified. I closed my eyes and buried my head into my knees again. I heard the strange little noise once more only. It was a lot closer this time. I peeked up above my knees and there it was, a ghost Pokemon. Only it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. In fact, it was really cute. A tiny little candle-like Pokemon floating in front of me. It smiled at me and made its little cry. It flew low above my head in a circle and stopped in front of me again. I held out my arms and it flew closer to me. I smiled and held it. Having a light in the darkness made it a lot less scary. We stayed together the rest of the night. It began to float around and I followed it, not fearing the dark now that I had my little Pokemon buddy with me. It took me in all of the rooms of the house. I laughed. It was giving me a tour. The little candle finally stopped by an old bed in one of the rooms and settled down on the bedside table. "You want me to sleep here?" I asked it. It made a little happy cry, which I took to mean yes. I laid down on the old bed, which was a little dusty and smelly, but a lot better than the hardwood floor downstairs. I smiled at my new friend as I closed my eyes. "Good night, little NightLight," I said as I drifted off. The next morning, the sun had lit up the entire house. It seemed far less creepy now. The little ghost wasn't on the nightstand anymore. Looking around the house, I found he was downstairs, near where I had been last night. It was holding something, the Pokeball. I had totally forgotten about it. I walked over to him, and he made a little cry and held the ball to me. "You want me to catch you?" I asked. He made his cry as I took the ball from him. Almost immediately, the red beam appeared and he was absorbed into the little red and white ball. I smiled and pressed the release button, letting him out again. "I'm gonna call you NightLight," I said. He seemed happy about it. We spent the early hours of the morning just playing, and I found out his attacks through a little good luck, guesswork, and help from NightLight. He had Ember, Astonish, Fire Spin, and Confuse Ray. "I didn't realize ghost Pokemon could learn Fire-type moves," I said to him as he made tiny flames dance about. Eventually I heard the laughter again. It was the gang. I smiled at NightLight. I'd almost forgotten I was here against my will. NightLight floated past me into the window. It made another cry, but this time it sounded angry. He floated back to me looking upset. I realized he must have seen what they did to me last night and felt sorry for me from the looks of it. He was mad at the group for upsetting me so badly. "It's okay, NightLight," I said gently. "We've made friends now. I'm not sad anymore." They banged on the door making stupid ghost noises. "Ooh, Hazel! Have they got you, Hazel?" one of them jeered. I saw a flash of red in the corner of my eye and NightLight was gone. He was back in his Pokeball. This upset me a little. He must really be sad if he couldn't even be out with me anymore. The door burst open and there they stood. They must have taken my upset expression over my Pokemon to be because they left me here. Haha, look at her, she's so scared. The empty room filled with taunts. I blinked at them. It was weird. All the other times they made fun of me, it had hurt. This time, however, it was like they were insulting someone else. I had NightLight now. None of them had a ghost Pokemon. In fact, I don't think any of them had ever been inside the strange house themselves. I just strode past them and made my way out through the tall grass. They followed me, still hurling insults at my back. "Where are you going, idiot? You don't have a Pokemon. You can't go through the tall grass on your own, remember?" Heh, little baby, so scared she needs to run home to mommy. They continued following me, make baby crying noises. I ignored them. It seemed ridiculously easy now that I had a friend. I smiled and my right hand fell onto NightLight's Pokeball. Mum yelled at me for going out without permission. She thought I had gone out with the gang when they passed our house early that morning, and was angry I hadn't asked. She softened when she saw NightLight. I guess it reminded her of her old trainer days. I was sent to my room and banned from TV or the computer for the rest of the day. At about lunchtime, she finally gave in to her nostalgia and gave me her old Pokédex to do some research on NightLight. It was a Litwick, a fire ghost type. NightLight and I would go off together and train a lot near the strange house. I never pushed him too hard though, and always made sure he was up for another battle before looking for more wild Pokemon. We were inseparable. My parents began to get a little worried about me, not making friends, spending too much time with my Pokemon. But they didn't get it. My Pokemon was my friend. My only friend. Months passed and I found myself spending more and more time actually in the strange house, making friends with many of the other Litwicks and Bayonets, even a couple of Lamperts. I never caught any, but they'd listen to me, even if I wouldn't ever be able to control them, as well as NightLight. I'd make treats and feed them. I'd pick berries and make sure they were all happy. I even cleaned up the strange house a little, dusting, sweeping, and straightening rugs. I wasn't strong enough to move the old heavy furniture, but the ghosts seemed to like floating it around anyway. So there probably wasn't much point to it. Now and then, I'd even sleep in the old bed. I wasn't scared of the dark anymore, but there was always about 5 Litwicks surrounding me, so I could normally see pretty well. We had relatives coming in from Nimbasa City for a couple of weeks, so I explained to my ghosts and left plenty of food for them. I didn't know if they understood, but my mother wasn't going to let me disappear every day, so I didn't have a choice. The visit from my family was going fine. They all loved NightLight. "I'd never seen a more healthy-looking Litwick," my aunt said. I glowed with pride. It was all right until the 3rd night. My mother sent me out to the Pokemart because she had forgotten to buy something. While I was on my way back, I ran into the gang again. "Hey, she's back," one of them called. "Where have you been hiding, little Pidove? Have you only just finished crying now?" They all laughed their stupid laugh. I clenched my hand tightly over NightLight's Pokeball, but I had never battled another trainer before. And while we could take down wild Pokemon, I was worried about how NightLight would be against trained ones. I ignored them and carried on walking. They didn't like that. It wasn't fun anymore that I ignored them. I guess they thought it was time to kick it up a notch. "Listen when we're talking, little brat," said Robbie. He grabbed my shoulder and there was a flash of red light and NightLight appeared from his ball. Without my command, he used a move. A black and purple mist shrouded the gang and they all started screaming. Then they turned and ran away from me. "Nightshade," I whispered to myself. I was stunned. I knew it was supposed to conjure up a scary mirage for your opponent, but I never really visualized what it would be like to use on humans. I felt a little uneasy. NightLight had never done anything without my command before, and I'd never thought he'd attack a human. I looked at him and he happily floated back to me. I couldn't help but smile. He was my friend and he had defended me. That was all. I didn't need to worry about him. He just wanted to scare them off. It's not like he'd actually hurt anyone, so it was okay. No real harm done. As soon as my family left, I was back in the strange house with all my friends, happy to see them again. They held no grudges that I was away for so long. NightLight seemed to be telling his fellow ghosts something very important. He was getting very emotional over it, his little purple flame getting bigger and brighter as he spoke. I didn't pay too much attention to it. He had an excitable nature. I had come to expect this sort of thing from him. One night, a few weeks later, when I had finished my rounds of keeping house and laying out food, I went back home. We battled a Nummel, and Litwick learned a new move, Inferno, replacing Memento, which was a terrible move that made Litwick faint from using it. Completely useless for a girl with just one Pokemon. It had made me look into Litwick's moves that were worth learning, though. Inferno, Hex, Nightshade, and Will-O-Wisp. Not a bad mix if you ask me. I said to NightLight as I reviewed his moves. You're getting pretty strong. He just chirped happily in agreement. Trapinch, use Sand Tomb! A voice came out of nowhere and sand filled the air, whirling around my little Litwick, trapping him. NightLight! I yelled in panic as the group of kids surrounded me. Not so tough now, are you, little ghost freak? I backed away. They'd come back for revenge. NightLight's Nightshade had pissed them off, and now they were here to make me pay for it. I wanted to run, but there's no way I was leaving NightLight alone with them. Nummel, use Takedown! This time the attack was aimed at me. I got hit hard, knocking me to the ground. I heard laughter again, but this time it made me angry. They were cowards. They couldn't take me when I had a Pokemon, so they did this. Even if I had NightLight, still wouldn't be a fair fight, all of them against me. Scorpy, use Pin Missile. Sharp spikes showered me as I cried out a little in pain. I looked at NightLight to see if there was any way he would be able to help me, but he was stuck. But when he heard me in pain, he let out a loud cry and started to glow. He was evolving. My new Lampert floated there as the sandstorm ended. My turn, I growled. NightLight, Inferno. I shouldn't have done it. Tell NightLight to attack people, but I was burning with anger. I hated them. The command had barely left my mouth when NightLight let go a massive fire blast. I watched the other kids run scared from my NightLight's attack, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. They deserved it. I could attack back now, and all I'd done was level the playing field. Not my fault they couldn't take it. Good work, NightLight, I said as he later rejoined me, and I gave him some of the leftover Pokemon treats I had in my pocket. Of course, my victory was short-lived. The next day I got in trouble for bullying. All the other kids went and told their parents, crying about how I just attacked them out of nowhere. I tried to show my mother my bruise from where I'd been knocked over and the little jabs from the pins, but the fact the other kids had large burns on their legs and arms was worse apparently, even though they deserved it. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told that if I couldn't control NightLight, they'd have to think about taking him away. I seethed with anger. They were not taking him away from me. I hated them. I hated all of them. The bullies, their families, my family. The only good thing about this stupid little village was the strange house. No one here listened. No one here understood. They were all too wrapped up in their own little pathetic worlds. On the 5th night of my grounding, I saw NightLight floating around outside with the other purple ghost Pokemon. I flipped open my mother's Pokédex and it told me it was a Ghastly. I'd never seen one before. They were defiantly not from this area. How on earth did he get here? I thought out loud. My Lampert tapped on the window and I opened it. He held out one of his arms and I took it. He pulled at my hand lightly, wanting me to come with him. I obliged, grabbing a Pokeball on my way out. Ghastly seemed like a good catch, if I'd have to travel far to see one again. I followed the 2 ghosts through the streets and noticed they were taking me to each of the gang members' houses. Ghastly would go up to their window and inhale deeply, breathing a weird fog-like substance. I looked it up in the Pokédex. It was a move called Dream Eater, which inflicted damage on sleeping foes. I smiled. Sweet dreams, I whispered, as skipping along the road in my bare feet, ghosts flying around me. I was happy. Thank you, Ghastly, I said when we were finished with all the kids. NightLight and I gave him a very light battle to weaken him up a little before I caught him. I let him out too and named him Vendetta. With that, I went back home. I kept sneaking out with my ghosts. I had to hide Vendetta during the day because I'd get caught with him when I was supposed to be grounded. It became routine to use Dream Eater on all of my bullies. I smiled when I saw them out my window and in the streets when I was allowed out again. They were a lot more jumpy. All the arrogance was gone. I gave Vendetta an affectionate pat on the head and gave both my boys a treat. After all, NightLight was the one that found him for me. Life went on as normal. I practically lived in the spooky house. I trained my Pokémon and caught a Bayonet, which I called Wrath. Vendetta evolved into Haunter, then a Gengar, and I even found a Duskstone to use on Lampert when I felt he was ready. I terrorized my bullies' dreams and I loved it. They never talked to me anymore. These days, it seemed like everyone was avoiding me, even my own parents. I had been nicknamed Witch Hazel. I liked it even though it was a little dumb. I wasn't a witch, but the name did make me feel powerful. I was the one to be feared now. Even NightLight became Chandelure, with the move Will-O-Wisp, Hex, Shadow Ball, and Inferno. He was perfect. He was beautiful. I loved Vendetta and Wrath, but they could never come close to my first Pokemon and what he meant to me. I loved Ghost Pokemon. I loved the fact that the rest of my teeny tiny town was scared of them. They were mine and mine alone, and NightLight had given me that. I was spending another night in my beloved strange house, which had become more of a home than my parents' house. I was sitting cross-legged near a town map, planning my Pokemon journey. I was planning to travel to collect all the Ghost-type Pokemon, maybe even a Dark-type or two. I was lost in thought about my travels, my Pokemon by my side. Maybe we'd collect gym badges, maybe even take on the Elite Four. I shook my head. No. Once I get caught a few of each Ghost-type Pokemon, I'm going to come back here and release them. Breed them. I was going to swarm the house in every Ghost-type there was. I sighed happily and watched the few Litwick float around happily. None of them hid from me anymore. I heard a noise coming from outside, but I ignored it. No one came near this place. They all feared the ghosts. The fools. I heard another noise. A crackling sound that I knew well but couldn't place. The smell came next. Smoke! I ran through the house looking for the source. Looking through one of the upstairs windows, I saw them, the gang. They had used their Pokemon to start a fire in my strange house. The rage boiled inside me again, fiercer than it had ever been. I didn't have a water Pokemon, I couldn't put it out. I turned the tap and stuck the old bucket underneath. The rusty old tap began to drizzle out water. I screamed in anger. NightLight responded first. He rammed the pipe too hard it burst, water came flooding out. I filled the bucket and poured water all over the flames. The rage was still burning white hot inside of me. My ghosts were angry too. I felt the whole house pulse with their energy. My eyes narrowed, and I knew what I had to do. Go get them, Wrath, I said darkly. He nodded and flew off. He used Shadow Strike to drag all those fools back towards the house. I heard their screams, their apologies. They didn't mean anything to me. They were going to pay. I was going to show them what happened when they messed with me, with my Pokemon. I knew I could never leave this house again. Ghosts could come to me like Vendetta did, but I needed to stay here to protect my family. The house swarmed with angry spirits as the door slammed shut, trapping those idiots inside with me, with my ghosts. I shook my head as they continued to shriek. Those fools really shouldn't be wasting their last breath like that. There was no escaping me, and screaming for mercy was pointless. I smirked as I let my ghosts descend on them. That was Lentimas Town. Final thoughts? Not really that creepy, but good. I'm really not sure what to say. It felt more like it was a short story than a creepypasta. It has a dark tone to it, but there's nothing particularly creepy about it. I'll go into the positives and the negatives. First with the positives. I think it's overall very well written. Word choice is good, story is well thought out, makes sense, doesn't drag on too long. In terms of being a story, I think this is pretty solid. In fact, with some changes to convert the plot into a non-Pokemon story, you could probably hand this in as a short story in a high school English class. For the negatives, this needed way more proofreading. There are major typos all over the place that needs fixing. The story was clearly submitted before it was actually ready, and I'm currently in the process of trying to get more people to help with proofreading to avoid this problem in the future. The other big problem is that it's just not that creepy. The story actually does too good of a job making you side with the main character, and even if we didn't, having us turn on the main character because of her making decisions that hurt people is more of something you would see in a horror story rather than one aiming for creepy. That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent in by the fans with What If? If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below, and if you want to help support me and what I do, check out the Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.